All right. Good morning, Doug. We want to do something a little bit different today. You have said to me and our viewers many times when they're trying to convince someone or open their mind that the best way to do it is the Socratic method, which is asking questions rather than making statements. And we have a great example of that from an ANCAP radio call, what our Twitter space that you were on, I think it was last Friday. And this young man, Josh, came in, who is a declared moderate, and started asking you some questions, and it went into I thought, a really good back and forth. And so what I was hoping to do today was to replay that. And then whenever you have something I'd like to add to it, I guess, as we go through. So whenever you want to say something, like, just let me know and I will pause it so that we can add to it. Is that okay for you?
Yeah, let's see how that works out.
Okay, here we go. This is Josh calling in. Here we go.
Oh, yeah, that's my company's motto. But yeah, I got a question for Doug. Josh J. Going on, so you guys questions for us, and your tagline says, "Who you voting for? Who you got?" Oh, yeah, that's my company's motto. But yeah, I got a question for Doug. I've never heard the two words libertarian philosopher combined in a sentence, or in a phrase, I guess. So what does that mean, libertarian philosopher?
Well, it would be a philosopher that believes in libertarian values. And I'm afraid that most philosophers in today's world don't. They're mostly political philosophers who have opinions about what the state should do. And a libertarian philosopher, if he talks about the state, would be talking about what the state shouldn't do. So that might be a jumping off point for a discussion of the subject.
Yeah, I'd like to get into that subject. I identify as a moderate. So as far as political ideology goes, but I imagine we agree on a lot of things. So I guess as far as politics and libertarian philosophy goes, I've only been in the space for like 5 minutes. I just read that and thought I'd come up and ask. So I really don't know much about you, Doug.
How do you define a moderate when you say you identify as a moderate? How do you define that?
That's exactly what I was going to ask, Dave. Cool. Very good. Yeah, after that question, please.
Yeah, so I have progressive views. I have and libertarian views.
What do you think of that as a notion? Like that you have both views, both libertarian and progressive views?
Well, this is Josh seems to me to be a decent guy and a thoughtful guy, but he hasn't thought to define his terms yet. Exactly what is a progressive? And I suppose there are a number of definitions of progressive floating around, but a progressive is one that feels like he's making progress towards a goal. That's the way they feel. Now, what's their goal? It's well, it's a kumbaya world where everything is nice and so forth, but without exception, progressives want to make things better by encouraging more state action. State action run by good people, the right people that are in office, not the wrong people that are in office.
Exactly. Yeah. And he's going to talk about that here in just a second, actually, specifically. He gives us a great example. But I think there are to me, there's two interesting viewpoints on this conversation to me. One is the approach you take in asking questions. I think it actually, you can see his mind opening up. You can see that he sees the black holes, the missing spots as you ask the questions. And it's really hard. Like, this wouldn't have been my reflexive response, but you and Dave both were like, let's ask questions. Let's ask questions. And that was so good. So there's that. And then the kind of drilling down on the philosophical core. So there's those two things together that I think are interesting. So let's listen to Josh a little more, what he's got to say about his progressive ideas.
So I mean, I can describe those if you guys want, but that's why
Go for it.
Yeah, so I'm progressive. I do like what Obama has done with Medicare. I think it's been poor execution, but I thought the idea was good.
Comments about that?
The idea is good. Well, yeah. Listen, I think it would be. It's like when Princess Diana was around. I mean, she said she wanted to clear the landmines and also buy everybody a puppy. And
I like puppies.
Yeah, of course, nobody wants to see somebody suffer from a serious medical condition. Would like to see anybody be able to get it, but he doesn't understand. It's who's going to provide this, and how's that person going to be compensated for providing the medical service? And having spent how many years in, what, at least 6 years in medical school after a normal college. I mean, is he going to be working for free just because he doesn't want to see anybody have medical problems? I suppose some doctors
Yeah.
do.
Yeah,
But-
you take this line of questioning pretty far with him. And so I'll back to that. But one of the things it's just the repeated statement of poor execution. You know, like communism is a good idea, it just hasn't been tried right yet. It's like that basic idea that no, it does work. We just need the right leaders in there, or we need to try harder, or is a technical issue. Why didn't it
Yeah.
succeed?
Just got to be tweaked a little bit, so forth. Yeah, it's frustrating when a guy like Josh, who's obviously of goodwill and is trying to think things out, he just needs a few tools. And so, and when you're discussing this with somebody, it's not a question of attacking them and showing them where they're wrong and pointing out where you're right, because that just cements people in a defensive position. So I really like to find out what's going on in the person's mind. And if he's a basically decent person, he'll ask himself, why did I say that? And am I right or wrong? Anyway.
Yeah, we'll see as Josh gets into some of these things. Here we go.
I think
Sure.
that, go ahead.
No, that's cool. I look, when you preface what you're saying with "I like," you're immediately in trouble, because in any meaningful and proper philosopher isn't interested in his likes or dislikes. You know, it's more rooted in what actually exists, what morally exists, and that what you're describing is the problem. You know, for lack of a better description, is because the whole planet wanders around saying "I like," "I dislike," and no one ever asks the question, well, where did my like or dislike come from? And what yardstick should I be using to measure any degree of appropriateness in any aspect of life, but particularly in the political structure?
Yeah, and Dave is absolutely right. That another thing, I don't know if we get into this later in the conversation with Josh or not, but a lot of people will say they don't understand the difference between "I think" and "I feel." I mean, people conflate those two words, and you shouldn't. When you say "I think," it means it's an intellectual thing where there are facts and logic, but "I feel" is just emotional, an emotional response as opposed to an intellectual response. And people say "I think" and "I feel" interchangeably, and they shouldn't. Either is valid, but let's know what we're talking about. Is it an emotional response or an intellectual response?
Yeah, and I also like the idea where what Dave's trying to get to the root of is that when you say you like something, you like it for what? Like for what outcome? And that, things have to, he says, what yardstick should we be measuring it against? So you like it, you can like a hammer and you can like a screwdriver, but you got to like them for what? For what outcome? And people don't usually get too far below the surface enough to understand have the philosophical underpinnings to kind of stitch it all together to make it make sense. And you'll see as we go on, Josh, who I think is earnest and thoughtful, honestly, but hasn't really been confronted. You'll see as these underpinnings aren't there as we get a little further into the conversation. So let's go.
It's mushy thinking on Josh's part.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I guess I'll describe why I like it. I
Yeah.
won't even say humans have unalienable rights. And one of them, in my opinion, is in a modern world is access to medical care.
Wait a minute. Okay, let's take that one. At whose expense? Why is there a right? Do you have a right to make a doctor perform surgery on you? I mean, what about his right to do what he wants?
Yeah, I mean, if a doctor, I agree. If a doctor does not want to perform surgery, we shouldn't force him to do so. My point is that humans let's just take America, for example, Americans, they all start out at different points in life. And given that, the government should raise the bar that some lower class people are at, so that they can have freedom of opportunity, and a fair freedom of opportunity, like someone like me who was raised in a middle class household.
Real quick, Josh, where are you calling in from? Just
He's coming from Wisconsin. So what do you think of that point of view? You know, that the government, well, he uses the government should earlier. I mean, is that the problem with his thinking here, or is it different?
I'm always afraid of the word should, like we should, and it usually starts out with we should. Those are the two most dangerous words in the English language when they're put together, we and should.
Because it means you. It mostly means you.
Yeah, right. Should, which implies that you have a kind of a moral or intellectual or some kind of failing if you're not doing something that you should be doing. And it means that you're about to be corrected with the right way.
Yeah. I wonder if like somebody, because he says, you know, he's a kid who grew up in a middle-class household. And so he thinks that, you know, people who grow up in a maybe working class or lower class household, you know, the government should do something to help them because it's not as fair for them and as it was for him. I mean, what that whole notion, I mean, what do you think about that?
Like,
where does that come from?
Well, maybe he thinks the government is we the people, but I see government as a completely separate entity with its own interests. It's as different from American society as General Motors is. I wish General Motors well, but you know, General Motors never aggresses against me. They make cars, I can buy them or I cannot buy them. The government doesn't give me any choices. He sees government as being a friend or even a cornucopia. It reminds me of one of the most amazing things that I've ever personally experienced. In that hour I had on the Phil Donahue show back in 1980, after I was talking about taxes, a guy in the audience, and oddly enough, this 1 minute on the Donahue show was cut out of the taping, which is available on YouTube of that hour on. The guy in the audience says, well, okay, why can't the government, why do we have to pay taxes for these things? Why doesn't the government pay for things? Like, talk about lack of cause and effect thinking. Where does he actually said that. And you know what the audience did? They spontaneously all clapped. Yeah, we don't want to pay for it with taxes. Why doesn't the government pay for it?
Exactly. This is the problem.
So how can you even start? You have to start with like forget about 2 + 2. You have to start with 1 + 1 reasoning and then go to 2 + 2. So forget about thinking about mathematics or algebra or trigonometry or other, because people just don't even think clearly. And
right. And you get to the bottom of like the way you go. I wish this conversation would have gone on a lot longer, but we still have quite a bit more of it left. But you dissect that, and it seems like there's points where he starts to realize it. So let's continue.
Sure, yeah, Wisconsin, Stevens Point, Wisconsin.
Well, you know, the classic mistake people, or the classic point people miss, Josh, is that, you know, you can't exist the concept of a right without an obligation on someone to deliver on that right. Does that make sense? So and this is the point Doug's making, is that when you say we should have a right to Medicare, it's a basic inalienable human right, then implicitly someone has an obligation to deliver that. Now, is it my obligation to deliver to you your perceived right to Medicare?
No, it's the government's.
He said it.
right. The government is a magic cornucopia.
Yeah, let's continue here.
Yeah, but let's just say I am part of the government, in as much as I'm a taxpayer, I'm a citizen, I'm being roped in involuntarily. I'm being roped in to deliver for your benefit. Is that morally right? Morally
Correct.
correct?
We would use your tax dollars to do what is the benefit of the common good.
Okay.
Josh, what do you think about coercion?
Yeah, I disagree with most forms of coercion.
What forms of coercion don't you agree with?
So forms of
Or do
coercion.
you agree with?
Sure. So in a war-like setting, I agree that, the CIA should be able to coerce the enemy. As far as what I don't agree with, I think the politicians should not coerce voters to, let's say there's what's the term for it? When there's something on the ballot that everyone votes on, a measure that everyone votes on, it'll be passed if a certain amount of people, what's that called?
Plebiscite, probably.
Sure, yeah. That's not the word I was thinking of, but
Referendum?
referendum. Thank you, Dave. If there's a referendum, then people should make up their own mind on that referendum, and no one should be coerced to vote on that referendum
Sure.
in a certain way.
Well, let me point out that if you're going to be a libertarian, that means you want to limit the amount of coercion in society. And the problem with government as an institution is that it's institutionalized coercion. That's the nature of government. It's not a question of voluntarism or kumbaya agreement. It's that 51% of the people, if they control the government, or for that matter, 1% of the people, if they control the government, can force everybody else to do their will. And that's coercion. We're looking, as libertarians, we're looking for a society where coercion is not an element, or certainly is not legalized and legally proper. And that's what the government's all about. Taxes. I mean, what are the products of government? There are war, pogroms, confiscations, persecutions, regulations, taxation. None of it is good. So we're anarchists in that we believe that the good things of society come from voluntary cooperation, not coercion. And coercion is what is institutionalized in the government.
Josh, what you're advocating, it's always good to boil this down to get away from the concept of government, but look at a moral equivalent. And you're sitting there at home and you're bringing up your family and you're living a peaceful life and you just want to do the right thing. And your neighbor pops across and he says, look, one of my kids is quite ill and I can't afford to look after them. We need some money. Can you give us some? And you say, well, no, I'm pretty committed with my own family. And so he comes back the next day with a gun and says, you're either going to give us some or I'm going to take one of your kids out. I mean, would you find that acceptable?
Well, absolutely not. No.
Okay. But that is the moral equivalent of what you're advocating.
Well, no, if you don't pay taxes, the government's not going to go to your house.
Oh, really?
Now, this is funny. It just shows that this earnest young man, I think he's earnest. He's just naive. He says, he believes in the coercion of the CIA to do whatever against, enemies in a wartime, so he's fine with that. And he doesn't think the government's going to attack you.
We should have pursued that with them. Yeah, the army would have been a better example than the CIA, because the CIA might do something to domestic citizens. Of course, the army might too, but it's kind of fuzzy thinking. And that is strange that he didn't think that the IRS would do anything if you don't pay taxes. They wouldn't knock on your door and start walking off with your stuff. Starting with your bank account, of course.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking. And Dave kind of calls him on that here. Just we'll keep going.
They'll come to your house, but they won't. Well, I guess
They'll knock politely.
That's not the point. That the cop will have a gun, but it won't be like a vigilante with a gun forcing you to do so. It's a government that's ran by the people. Although,
okay, so let's talk about the difference between a vigilante and that's bad, but a government run by the people coming to your house with a gun to force you to do stuff is different. It's qualitatively different.
It's I think it's this whole idea of democracy. People really believe that we live in a democracy, it's we the people, it's voluntary, but it's not. I mean, this is the big lie, that if people hear it enough times, they don't even question it. In fact, questioning the fact that you don't have any control whatsoever over what the government does. In fact, if you protest against it increasingly in countries like Canada, Australia, England, and actually throughout the EU now, if you are a squeaky wheel, you don't get the grease. They're going to grease you.
You get greased. Yeah, that's funny. It's true. It's just funny. It just shows, again, naive thinking on his part. It's like a lack of exposure to the real world, it seems. Just that he doesn't even understand that he's never heard of a no-knock raid. He doesn't think the police come to your door, or that they don't make mistakes, that they aren't overly aggressive. That's one difference. If he had grown up in working class or lower class, he would understand, I think, that the government isn't so benevolent. And I think that is kind of a class privilege that does exist. You don't see it as much. Unless you're dissident.
You're right. Yeah. As a middle class person, you tend to think, well, correctly, the police are your friends. They're going to defend people. But if you're part of the lower classes, I mean, you're among the people that the cops are beating up and disregarding, and yeah.
Okay, well, let's continue here.
So our current government is not really run by the people, which is what I'm trying to change. But
Sure. No, I mean, fundamentally, no government is ever run by the people, because the people are incapable of acting in unison in that romantic way.
He didn't go into much detail after that about that idea, but can you explain more? Because I think it goes to the democracy thing again, I think. But what did Dave mean by that? That just people are incapable. It couldn't be no government of the people. That's just like, it's not possible.
Well, this idea of democracy, which is what Josh kind of is holding as an ideal in his head, it's that the people are an undisciplined mob. They, when they get together, they act according to the lowest common denominator. It's not like, look, the only democracy that really existed was in ancient Athens, where the free men of the community would get together and they would discuss things. And there were hundreds and hundreds of them. I don't know how they kept the discussion under control and kept it polite, but we don't have any discussion. We elect somebody who wants power, which itself should make you suspicious of them. And, you can write your congressman, but he's living, his peers, your elected representatives, you're not a peer. His peers are the people that live within the Beltway and he associates with and talks with every day. He doesn't talk with his constituents. Yeah, sure, they talk with their constituents because it looks good, but
like even the notion of voting to me is having a couple kids, as you're parenting the young ones and you're trying to manipulate them toward specific outcomes. You give them choices. Do you want to read this bedtime story or that bedtime story? But implication is we're going to bed and there's going to be a story beforehand, but they feel like they're a participant in it. And this is the way, and voting in and of itself is fundamentally like that, because, you don't get to say what you want on the ballot. Instead, it's like, here's two things or three, or lesser of two evils or lesser of three evils, whatever it is, and choose amongst these, child. And now this is now some mandate from the people to do what they will.
Well, Josh has entirely, it's naive on his part, because growing up in a nice middle-class family and going to nice middle-class schools, you're teachers have always given you the standard party line about how everything is honest, and if things get out of control, maybe it'll be like that Jimmy Stewart movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, where
Yeah.
everything will be worked out. But it's not that way. I don't know. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, but you guys do a good job. Let's continue with this, because you guys do a great job convincing him, I think, or at least opening his mind.
Look, trust me, if you want to just do a personal experiment, just stop paying any taxes for the next couple of years and see if anyone ultimately does turn up with a gun, because I'm telling you, they will. They eventually they will. And of course, as you know, one of the key features of government is they'd like to own all the guns, so that they can use them in that means anyway.
Let's look at the morality of this, Josh. Would you say that if a mugger came up to you on the street and wanted your wallet, would you say that he had a right or not? Was it moral or not for him to steal your wallet?
Yeah, I have an unalienable right to my property, therefore he does not have the right to my wallet.
Okay, what if he came up to you and said, I'm going to steal your wallet because I need a serious medical operation and I don't have the money, and stealing your wallet will make it possible. How about that?
Yeah, he still does not have the right to my wallet.
Well, okay, that's good. But what about if he talks to the other people in the neighborhood and they all agree that you should give up your wallet so he can get the operation? Does that change the moral character of things or not?
No, the neighbors with him would still not have the right to my wallet.
And how is that different from having a vote and calling yourself the government? And
so it's different because since I was born into this country, I have implicitly agreed to a contract with the government.
Okay, first of all, I love that line of questioning, and you're not judgmental in it, and you're in a like in terms of keeping his mind open and keeping him from getting defensive. You walk him through honest questions, and he gets to explore his own thinking. I'm impressed by the way that you do that. I think that's, again, the first thing that people who are trying to open people's mind should take away from this is the questioning.
I'm trying to recall whether the next tack that we take is, he says that because you're born in the country, you have an implicit contract with the government.
Yes.
I hope I asked him next, what if you were born in the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany with that
Yeah,
contract?
let's listen to that. And listen to that part, and then we'll stop it.
So if the government wants my wallet, I implicitly signed a contract to do so.
Actually, I have to say, I don't know how, from contract law, how you can implicitly sign something anyway. I don't know how. When do you sign it when you're a baby, when you're born, or is this a matter of when life starts? Is it when you're conceived that you sign the contract, or is it after you are birthed? Is it when you get your social security number? What point do you sign this contract exactly? I'm kind of curious about that.
I don't know anybody that signed such a contract, but I suppose that theoretically, after you have a fully formed mind at age 16, 18, 21, scientists say that your brain isn't fully formed until you're 25. Okay, you sign a contract to obey the government. Okay, that's fine. I can't argue with that.
That would be fine if it was explicit, but implicit.
Yeah, he's confusing the words. I implicitly signed a contract. I don't think you can implicitly sign a contract. A contract has to be explicitly signed.
Exactly. So here's your rebuttal to him, which he doesn't quite get, but I think we can go into it in more detail.
are you sure? What if you were born in the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany?
Oh, good.
Would you, just because you're born there, would you have to go along with whatever the rulers of that country say?
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. If they chose to become a citizen of the United States of America, then the government would have a right to their wallet.
So unfortunately, he didn't understand that question. He's just saying, like, if you're born someone else, where else, and then you come here with those laws applied to you. And actually, I agree with that. Like, that makes sense. That could be an explicit agreement. If you're immigrating to a country and you're choosing, then to obviously if you're immigrating, you're going to, I'm accepting the laws, the burden of the government here, right? It's my choice to come here. But what he misses is your main point, which is, which you can go into it with if you're born in Nazi Germany, are you still in that implicit agreement to do what they did?
Yes, well, Josh is implying, and we didn't pursue this adequately with them, that yes, you'd have to do what Der Fuhrer says or what Stalin says or whatever. I mean, it's logical.
Yeah, I just think he didn't understand the question, unfortunately. But still, it's interesting. Let's see. I just have a couple more minutes of this left to wrap it up.
Well, to an extent.
Indeed. Yeah. Josh,
Well,
Josh, this is a critical point. And, it's something that each individual does need to resolve. And it really only comes from resolving, as much as anything, we'll say, a sound moral philosophy, which is important for a meaningful existence. And, the questions Doug just posed to you are fundamental moral propositions that every individual needs to properly and fully resolve, and the notion that, you've signed implicitly to a contract with the state. I mean, the state when you were born is dramatically different to the state today. The state today is far more aggressive, far more nasty. Your rate of taxation is probably higher than it was back then. So, I mean, did you also implicitly sign up that the contract can vary as the state decides on a daily basis? I mean, at what point of complete incarceration, for example, do you start to say, okay, no, I actually didn't sign up for this?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I'll preface this by saying, like, the reason I'm moderate is because I do have libertarian viewpoints, and I think we need to dramatically lower the reach of government in this country. With that said, can you ask the question again?
Well,
I love that. You could see because he's not defensive, and it's clear to me that his mind is opening by this whole line of questioning. Like he's thinking about it because he doesn't even have a response, and he goes to this automatic thing. Well, this is why I'm a moderate, because I believe government it's like he's replaying, some formulaic talking point that he's heard before. The government's too big and we need to operate better.
Yeah, he's confused. He's trying to fit together round objects into square holes and triangular objects into square holes. It doesn't quite fit. He's trying to piece it all together. So
yeah, and through good questioning is how he's getting there. Like I think that's so important for people on our side to understand.
Well, this might be one of the big advantages of talk radio, and what we're trying to do with the ANCAP radio is that we'll get better at answering these questions, which at the relatively ethereal level that we live at, we don't deal with that so much because we're usually talking to like-minded people. And this is like grade school math, and we're at the high school and college level. So hopefully this ANCAP radio station that we have, which I hope that some of the people listening to us now will tune into it and call in.
Yeah, I think we really want to attract, I'd love to attract more people like him, either people who define themselves as moderates or progressives or conservatives, so that you could go through, the hosts, whoever they are on that day, could go through this questions with them, because I think it shows, first of all, the best way to shape somebody's thinking or to influence their thinking is to open their mind and not to press a point. Pressing the point doesn't do it in the same way that asking questions does. And I think the way you do that is perfect here. And the second thing is that these core philosophical points are just not thought through by anybody. They're just so poorly understood, and that they need to be explored if you expect, the young, earnest guys like this. So I think it really mean well if you expect them to affect the world in a positive way, because there's a risk that people like Josh, who means well and wants to do good, can do a lot of damage in the world unintentionally because he lacks the philosophical core that you refer to all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And dealing with the public or people of goodwill, you don't want to argue. Arguing is a real mistake. You want to ask them to explain what they believe and see if they can answer the questions themselves. Because this isn't like answering questions about history or science where there are facts. This is a question of digging into your own mind and thinking logically about what you know personally. So anybody can be, and everybody should be, a practical philosopher, really.
And how do you, is your disposition always been to ask people questions like this, or did you alter? Is it a thought out strategy you adopted a long time ago? Because I've seen you do it many, many times, but is it just come naturally to you, or
No,
practiced?
it's something that I had to work on, because when I was young and brash, I'd like to, as most people do, I think, if you think you have a point, then you want to say, touche, I scored a point on you, I win the argument, I show that I'm smarter than you are, or I know more than you do. And this is a very bad habit. It's a great way to make enemies that serves no useful purpose. You know, it's just a bad idea. So I'm trying to work at it, and because you can actually learn something by asking questions and eliciting an answer. You can't learn too much by making an accusation and making gotcha points.
Yeah. But how do you, is there any strategy you use to, in the moment, catch yourself or make sure that you're defaulting to the Socratic method instead? Because when you know the right answer and you know where something is wrong, it's really easy to kind of, I'm tempted always to just jump in and be like, no, here's the right answer. This is actually how you should do it.
No, we all are. Try to, I think you ought to keep Robert Fawkes' character Columbo in mind, because he would always just ask the accused or the criminal or whoever it was, I don't understand this. Can you explain it to me? And that's very helpful, and it keeps things on a friendly, non-aggressive level, so people don't get hot with the collar. Kind of take things slow. Listen carefully to what somebody says. It's harder to do when you're on radio, and you have to be quick and entertaining. But we'll get better at it on ANCAP radio if we continue it, and I think we will if it's successful. We'll see if there's enough interest on the part of the average listener to engage in philosophical thoughts. Because what's philosophy? It's love of wisdom, and wisdom is different from knowledge.
Much more interesting.
Yeah, it actually is. It's got all kinds of dimensions. It's got it's logic and morality, I think, are two of the big ones.
Yeah, I think for the ANCAP radio stuff, we probably should think about how we get more people like Josh on there. Maybe titling the Twitter Spaces a little differently, so you draw them in rather than necessarily just drawing in the people who fundamentally agree with libertarian or ANCAP ideas. Because even those people who agree with them, it's like the young guys still, the foundation is not quite built yet on that, so they need to hear how you actually work through these problems with people, I think.
Maybe for each show, it ought to be phrased as a question, like, should we have free medical care? What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
There are hundreds of questions like that we can ask, that we can address.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a really good idea. I'll talk to Dave about that.
Some people, everybody's got an opinion on this, and they think they have the answer, they can call in and we can discuss it. And
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay. Well, good. Well, just how did you like this process of listening to yourself and providing feedback on yourself?
well, listen, I don't like listening to myself. It makes me self-conscious. I guess that's logical. You listen to yourself, you become
Conscious of yourself.
So, I didn't like the experience particularly, but it's beneficial because, little things like that. Oh, okay, I've got to improve that. I've got to, yeah. So it's beneficial.
Okay. Well, I thought, like I said, I just, when I listened to that conversation, the way you handled it with them so gently in your questioning, so slowly, and you're walking down the path, you go, okay, well, that's good. That makes sense. Now, what about if he gets together with all your neighbors and they agree that he really should have your wallet? I mean, that whole process of walking down that path, it just exposes his mind to like territory that is otherwise walled up. No chance of getting past his defensive barriers, I guess, to get him to think new things. So I don't know.
Hopefully Josh is going to ask himself, I never thought of that before. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Hopefully
it seemed
that's-
like he did in the moment. Even it seemed like it was hitting him in a weird way, but just a guess. So okay, well, I think we'll leave it there for today, Doug. Unless you have anything else you want to add before we go.
No, I think Dave Henderson did a great job too.
Yeah,
I think
he's solid.
we've had Dave on the show before. We probably ought to have him on again, but Dave is in his element in talkback radio, because the reason why Dave is one of the reasons why he's very well known in New Zealand is that he financed and set up 4 radio stations in the 4 large cities of New Zealand. And they were basically talkback format radio stations. So he's practiced.
You could tell as soon as he steps in, he takes the helm and steers the ship properly.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing. All right. Well, good. We'll leave it there. Thanks, Doug. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt.